All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy. I'm here with Maddie B. We're going to be talking about football playoffs, basically this whole show. We're going to start off with a little bit of high tempo. Matt, you got anything for this week?
Yeah, just real quick, show of hands. If your team won their bowl game this week, go ahead and raise your hand. Oh, just one of us. Okay.
Well, there is only two of us. And
well, thanks a lot, Mish. I had a great burn set up, and then you couldn't come on.
What? Me? Oh, Mishler.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, Rick, I don't know where he is. He's out again this week. For my high tempo, I saw that a kid from Marshall got shot and is paralyzed now. And he said it was a freak accident, but he was at a party and a fight broke out that he wasn't involved with, and he ended up getting shot. Like, if it was me, I would try to avoid those situations if you're in college. I know it's tough, but like, come on. You need to find some new friends. I'm just going to throw that out there because I saw a lot of people that were painting this as the tragedies of tragedies, but it was in Maryland. I know Maryland has some strict gun laws. I assume it was handgun fire since they said the bullet lodged in his spine. But a sad story all around. I would just like to see some of these colleges throw down some type of development program to help people get into better situations, because I think they're getting pulled in with football and other sports into better situations, and they don't have that support system built in. And once you get on break, bowl games are over. Maybe, I don't know if Marshall made a bowl this year. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're home for break, and then they're right back into their old routine, hanging out with bad crowds and things like that. So I hate to see that type of thing, and I wish that universities would spend a little bit of time trying to do some professional development to get kids away from that. But I'm going to jump right into it with a Steel City update right now. The NFL playoffs, we're going to talk about them later. The Steelers are in. They ended up with the bye. I think they locked that up last week when our last show was on. So it's not looking too bad for them. Got what they expected. Patriots did end up winning. So the Patriots have home field advantage. If the Steelers meet them, Steelers fall on second in line, and they can go ahead and make up any missing ground if the Patriots were to lose and get that home field advantage through the rest of the playoffs. With the Pittsburgh Penguins, I don't know what's happening. What is happening right now? I'm looking at the Metropolitan Division. Penguins have 41 points. Next to last in the division. They're behind the Hurricanes. In fact, they just lost to the Hurricanes the other day. It's getting tough to watch. I keep waiting for them to break out of their slump. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games. They're 1 point above the Flyers, or they could be in dead last in the Metropolitan Division. They have the firepower. They just need to get everything together. And it's the beginning of the year. I said all along that this is when they need to turn it on. And now I need to see some results, because at this point, I'm starting to get a little bit worried. I don't have anything on the Pirates for an update on them, other than I haven't seen them make any moves that would have me the least bit confident in them making the playoffs this season. So pretty much the same old. Rick's not here to give a little bit more insight into some of the Pittsburgh stuff, since he has more connections there. But we'll go ahead and jump right into the college football playoffs. Matt, I'll let you start this off.
Hold on, before you get into that, Rich.
Yeah.
I was thinking, as far as the whole Penguins thing is concerned right now, I've talked with my buddy who follows the Penguins pretty closely, and one of the things that we were talking about with that was, he was saying, there is a lot of exhaustion from the players, because you figure, going off of back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, they've essentially the last 2 years played an entire second season in addition to the regular season. And I think what you're seeing is some of that is starting to catch up with them. And I think that's where we're seeing some of the issues with poor play and sluggish play, because for the last 2 years they've been playing deep into the playoffs, and I think it's finally starting to catch up with him. You have some injuries with Murray that's been ongoing that now I don't think they have as much depth at the center position with Marc-Andre Fleury going to Vegas, and you're starting to see some of those things add up.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I don't even know if we touched on that before, but yeah, with the Penguins playing in the past 2 Stanley Cups, they essentially played, a lot of those series went to 7 games, so you're adding on an extra whole season over that same time period. And that's why I expected them to start slow. I was hoping that they would rotate enough guys in, get some young guys experience, but the lines just aren't picking up. When they get into their second and third lines, things aren't going well. And that's where I was hoping they would get some of their superstars rest. But at this point, it's not even about staying fresh for the playoffs. It's about getting to the playoffs. The good thing for that is I think overall they're only like 10 points down. I can bring up the standings here and check. I think they're not really that far behind in their division. I don't know if it's just because of there's more parity or what. But yeah, they're exactly 10 points behind the Capitals for first. And so if they get on a streak, they could climb pretty quick into the playoffs. Their 41 points actually would put them in 4th in the Atlantic. So not too worried. It's just the fact that a lot of parity in their division. They need to get things done to climb back up. We'll go ahead and swing into the college football playoffs. Matt, I'll let you kick that off too. What did you see about the games? I think you want to talk about?
Yeah, one of the things that immediately jumped to my mind was I was surprised to see UCF knock off Auburn, and I believe it was the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
That leaves UCF as a non-Power 5, undefeated on the year. They knocked off an Auburn team that, mind you, beat both of the teams that are now this year playing for the college football playoff. I don't see how you can't name them at this point your college football national champions. They should have been put in the playoffs. They weren't put in the playoffs. They beat 2 of the teams that are now representing college football's top 2 programs, and they don't have a chance to play for that right to be there. I think this is finally the year where the playoff system came back to bite them in the rear end, where they're going to pick and choose from only the Power 5s of who gets in, who doesn't. And I think it's finally hit that point where it come back to hurt them.
Yeah, and
what were your thoughts?
Well, I was tweeting during the game. I'll take credit for the Southbound Sports tweets saying that UCF should just claim it. Claim the national championship. Because what's holding them back at this point? Go ahead and say that you won the national champion. You're national champions. Because if you look at it, going back to 30, 40 years ago, they named champions before bowl games were even played. And in 1973, I believe is the season, Alabama claims the national championship from like the coaches poll that was taking place before they played Notre Dame, who was number 2, and they lost to Notre Dame. So in that fact, the other polls all named Notre Dame. I was curious because I was looking at the list, and Mo Hurst from Michigan was named a consensus All-American, and I wanted to see like, well, what denotes a consensus? I think you have to be named by 2 or 3 of the major selectors. You can't just be picked by 1. If you're picked by only 1, you're named All-American. If you have to have multiple to be named that consensus national champion or All-American. And in this sense, if you're looking at national championships, I went back to that and I wondered if they had, because you see that they have, certain schools can claim national champions and some of them say that they're consensus, and I wanted to see if that was a difference. Well, for national champions, you only need one body, one person to say that you're national champion and you can claim that you're a consensus national champion. Because there's no playoff format that includes everybody, there is no actual national championship trophy from the NCAA. If you go by the record books, and what's that? They have that collegiate tournament trophy where they add up points from sports or whatever. I don't even think football is a part of that because it's not technically an NCAA championship sport. It's not a trophy. They don't recognize it. They let schools claim it, but they haven't actually had that trophy. I think they definitely want the playoffs to expand, because if you look where the NCAA makes their money, it's college basketball. There's only one sport that makes more revenue for these colleges than basketball, and that's football. So you better believe that the NCAA wants to be a part of these playoffs. Now, going from that, does that mean they're going to expand? I don't know. I think that if UCF starts claiming this as a national champion year, saying that this team was a national champion, we're going to go ahead and publicize it, we're going to put it in our stadium, we're going to hang it up, who's going to say that they weren't? Because all they have to say is Alabama or Georgia, whoever, you lost to Auburn, we beat them. Like, what did you want us to do? We didn't get to play you guys. I'm sure they would love to play. I think it was a class move by Scott Frost. I know I've made fun of him on the show a little bit before, but him sticking around, I actually thought they were going to lose. I think I even picked them in. My pick'ems were awful, but we'll get to that when we talk about regular bowl games. But him sticking around was basically an infomercial for Nebraska football, because he was able to win. He showed he cared for his players. He's already said that everyone that's on his staff now is welcome to come join them because they're winners. And he's not going to be trying to bring in Nebraska guys for assistance. He's going to bring his guys in. So I think UCF should definitely claim it. There was a lack of interest from me after UCF won in the playoff games, I'm not going to lie. The Rose Bowl was an awesome game. But once UCF won, to me, that was a champion. Like, why would I watch Alabama or whoever? You can say that they're better teams, but what are you basing that off of? You have any additional thoughts, Matt?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Part of the reason that they went to the 14 playoff is because they wanted to weed out that extra wheel. And I've gone back and forth with it. I think seeing the way the season played out, had they have been willing to accept the non-power into it, I wouldn't have had an issue. If you're saying Georgia's going to make it, then Alabama doesn't get the nod and you put UCF in, I think the argument could be made that UCF could have beaten Clemson in the playoff game the same way Alabama did. And I think it eases some of the pressure that you say, okay, well, here's a non-Power 5 school that won their conference. If we're saying conference champions matter, they won their conference. They went undefeated in the regular season. They weren't a one-loss team. So, even looking at like a Notre Dame, Notre Dame would have had one loss and had they have not stumbled the second time, would have been in a situation where they're saying, well, we lost one game all year. We need in. I think you go off of conference champions, and you can keep it at a 14 playoff. You don't have to expand it if you don't want to. If you want to try to keep it as simple as possible and let the games matter, then have that easier criteria of conference champion, and you eliminate some of this. Urban Meyer complained about it. Nick Saban complained about it, but then at the same time, they're going to advocate, when their team was the one that was on the verge of being left out. I think you settle it immediately by closing that loophole and say, if you're not a conference champion, I'm sorry, if for that year, regardless of what your team is, regardless of what your blue chip ratio is, you don't deserve to be in the playoff. And it, to me, that just fueled more of my anger of it shouldn't matter. Alabama should not be in there. They should not be playing for another championship right now because they didn't win their conference.
I look at that two ways. The conference champion, to me, matters, but at that point, really the only way that the college conference champion comes into effect is if you're a smaller school. You better believe that if Notre Dame's sitting there one loss, and I've joked about this before, Michigan sitting there, like Alabama this year, they had the choice, Alabama or Ohio State. They were salivating over both teams. If that was let's say that wasn't Alabama, let's say that was even Auburn against Ohio State, Auburn would not have been picked. They would have been high-fiving that they get Urban Meyer. I mean, once you're in that top tier of big schools that are going to be bringing television viewers and attendance, that's all they care about. And I think it's very clear after this year. That's all they care about. Because you have UCF, this was the perfect year to throw them in there. And don't tell me that they don't deserve to be there Why wouldn't they blow out Clemson? Clemson lost to goddamn Syracuse. Syracuse is a shit school in football. Let's be honest. They don't fundraise money. They get no one to their games. Clemson loses to them. And then, of course, that was an embarrassment last night watching that Clemson game. They couldn't do anything. So why was I watching that game? It wasn't exciting. UCF would have put up more of a fight against Alabama than Clemson. Clemson, their quarterback was so frazzled that he couldn't do shit. And you can't tell me otherwise because Clemson struggled all year against these guys. They were in close games against NC State. They were in close games here and there. They couldn't put teams away. They weren't the same team. Did they get in because the conference champion? Yeah, I could see that. But what's your criteria here? Did you pick Clemson because they won the conference and because they're clearly in a weaker conference? They're not getting pushed like Alabama. Alabama comes in and just throttles them. That wasn't a game. Now, Alabama shouldn't even have been there, but at that point, what do you do? I would have liked to...
With where you're at right now, I almost think it's not a 4-team playoff, it's a 3-team. Because if you're basing it off of reputation, as long as Nick Saban stays at Alabama, just have one of those 4 spots as Alabama, and then who are your other 3 people going to be? Because it doesn't matter. Like from what I saw on what the playoff committee is saying, it's Alabama regardless, or it's Ohio State regardless, if it's not, and then they go from there. Because there was plenty of arguments to be made of other people. I mean, to me, the thing that got me thinking more about the Ohio State issue is that they're a very bipolar team as well. They remind me of a Clemson. Which Ohio State team were you going to get? Were you going to get the one that went out and curb stomped whoever they played in their bowl game? Or do you get the team that lays an egg versus a team that they should just pound? You know, earlier in the year, they're playing teams and they're playing them close and they can't score points, they don't do anything. And then it seems like every year I watch an Urban Meyer coach team hurry up and run the score up the last 2 or 3 games of the year and score 70 points on people, 80 points on people so that he can justify Ohio State being in the running for the college football playoff. You know, show your consistency with the recruits and the talent that he has in that program. He should be up there with Alabama. It's inexcusable for him to have the hiccups that he has along the way.
Yeah, I look at that and I look at like even the Urban Meyer thing. He recruits so well. It's like he has so many stats against him that does Urban Meyer win the big game? I mean, no matter where he's been, he's always won in such a short period of time. Are those his recruits? Once they're his recruits there, he doesn't take that next step. So that's why you have the negative recruiting against Urban Meyer. Now, Nick Saban, he kind of had the same thing, but he's been in Alabama for so long now that he kind of gets a pass. But I just think the seeding should have been different. Clemson, I know they were number 1, and you could have put another team there, but I would have liked to see like Georgia number 1. And I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't matter. Just have the SEC teams play first round. I think you would have had a better playoff. I think Clemson loses to all 3 of those teams. So you have Oklahoma there. Oklahoma, I think, was one of the top teams. Did they have some issues? Was Baker Mayfield 100% for that game? I think if they split it up correctly, and they would have had Georgia play Alabama in one of the games, and then Clemson play Oklahoma, I think you'd be seeing a very favorable matchup. You might even see that Oklahoma-Georgia rematch. Like, let's say that Rose Bowl game wasn't the Rose Bowl. Let's say Oklahoma and Georgia met for the national championship. How much more exciting would that be? Instead, you kind of forced it when you had the clear path. Why make the 2 SEC teams meet in the championship game? That's only going to hurt, I would think. Are you a fan, Matt? Are you excited about this game?
I'm not from a very cynical standpoint, and I guess maybe it's from hanging out with you for so long and thinking more of the politics and the money aspect of it, that I think it made more sense for the SEC network, that's an ESPN affiliate, to try to set it up so that they could have 2 SEC schools where you're going to generate that extra money, where you're doing nothing but plug the SEC, and it's just generating extra revenue for ESPN that was already struggling financially and having to lay off employees. If you're a conspiracy theorist, it feeds right into what exactly the kind of things that drive people crazy. Because there you have, in the SEC, you have a team like Auburn who earlier in the year knocks off both Georgia and Alabama, but then somehow is completely left out of the playoff, and you end up with a playoff where UCF, who's an undefeated conference champion, beats Auburn, is left out, and you have these two teams who lost to a team that lost to a non-Power 5 are now competing for your national championship, and it makes the whole thing a joke.
Yeah, and I think that might have been why they gave Clemson the edge, because I think they did beat Auburn early in the year. And so they're probably looking at it and saying, well, Clemson beat the team that all these other teams lost to. But to me, if you're looking at it from pure dollar standpoint, two teams that could make it to the championship. Now, maybe they thought that both SEC teams would lose, and maybe they didn't want to end up with another Clemson-Alabama national championship, because that's the problem here with this 4-team playoff. Teams get in runs where they get a high bowl game, and then you'll see a team make a 3 or 4 year run. Now, Alabama, they're the outlier here. But if you look at like Florida in the like mid to late 2000s, they get on a 3 or 4 year run. That's just traditionally how teams make a run at the playoffs, because you have 2 or 3 recruiting classes in a row. Those guys mature together, and you make 2 or 3 runs at the playoffs. Think of like Texas around that same time. They might have had a class in between, but they won the national championship. Then a couple of years later, they were right back in it. Now they're cycled out. Now it's Oklahoma's chance. But with the playoffs now, you're seeing the same team. You're seeing Clemson make it every year. You're seeing Alabama make it every year. And I think people are going to tune out. Maybe it's just me. I know this year there's going to be a TV bump just because they weren't on New Year's Eve. So the fact that they were on New Year's Day are going to bump the ratings through the roof. Excuse me. And I hope that that's not a reason for them to stick with this format for more years. Because I'm looking at the standings right now, and I had said that wouldn't it have been great if that Ohio State-USC game was one of the playoff games, and then maybe Miami-Wisconsin. Even if you went to 8 teams, I know you'd have to throw UCF in there just to get it on the table. I'm a fan of a 16-team playoff now. Before, I thought maybe 8 would be good. You could have 5 conference champions and then 3 at large, and then do the old BCS thing where it's either the highest ranked Power 5 or Notre Dame. So you have UCF in this year as like number 5, and then you would have maybe Miami or USC would be fighting for that last spot, maybe Wisconsin, I don't know. But I'm looking at this, and I think you just need to go to 16 teams. You're going to have better games that way. I mean, half these games don't matter. Speaking truthfully, Matt, how many bowl games did you watch this year?
I would say I watched over half of them, but that's because I know I'm in a weird group by myself where I am obsessed with it. I love the game, and for me, it's almost as much. I want to see what they're doing at the collegiate level to see how can I take, some of the concepts that they're running on that level and adapt it to the high school level that I'm at now, because I want to stay ahead of the curve of what other people in my division are doing. And if you pick up, all it takes is one rink or one, I like watching guys like Scott Frost and Gus Malzahn that are able to take, the traditional things that you see at every level of the game and kind of put it on steroids and see he's successful wherever he went. He was in Oregon. He had phenomenal offenses there. He took it to UCF, where you would think that there would be a dramatic, talent drop off. He goes undefeated with that talent. You look at Florida Atlantic and you see what was Lane Kiffin doing with the talent that he had at Alabama. He had his issues with Saban, got run out, ends up at Florida Atlantic, and there was the videos early on that it looked like he was just like he was there because no one else would take him, and now he has Florida Atlantic in a position where they're playing phenomenally, and they have to be in your top 25 for next year because of how well they played through the course of this year.
Yeah, and I think
I can see the point that you made earlier, though. Go ahead.
I mean, if you want to see, like, to me, you're talking about like Florida Atlantic. there's no reason for me to watch them. I know I had them high in my pick'em, and Lane Kiffin I think is a wonderful coach, but outside of that, why watch that game? It meant nothing. I know you're ribbing me about the Michigan game, but realistically, why watch that game? What did that do? Gave 5 losses compared to 4 losses. Like, is that going to have an impact on this year? I mean, to be honest, the Orange Bowl game last year that Florida State and Michigan played in, did that have any big jump for this year? I mean, both our teams sucked. So, like, what's the point of that game? Jake Butt ruined his NFL career possibly by getting his knee lacerated there, torn ACL or whatever in like the third quarter. Peppers didn't play because he was hurt. I mean, did that hurt his stock? Well, like, why even have that game? I think that's what the NCAA is looking at here. And eventually it's going to come down where ratings keep dropping. ESPN wants these games because even the lowest of the low are still outdrawing the NBA. But at some point, you could have a better product. Why not? They just don't want the less amount of games, because what other sport right now is drawing eyeballs? Nothing. No one watches the NBA. Even on the Christmas day, I would stack it up. I really want to dig into the numbers. I should have looked it up before the show. Maybe I'll do it whenever I let you talk. But the NFL actually was on Christmas Day this year, and I want to see how those numbers compare to the NBA. Like, did that Steelers game, it was on like the NFL Network, did that draw as many as all those NBA games combined? Because that's a typical day. That's the reason ESPN wants all these games, is because it's free programming for them. The cities pay for it. They bring everybody in. I talked about it. I think you were off the show, Matt, but the Bahamas Bowl, they were letting people just bring cases of beer to the game. I think they said like through the first, 20 games or so, the average attendance was 4,000 people. They wanted people just to come. You could just bring your own beer and you could just go sit there. And they even there were some reports that they let people go into the locker room for like a mini tour after the game. You could hear the coach give a speech. Because no one's there. And they don't really do the stadium show. They did one for the Michigan game. That whole top section was empty. Like, why would a fan want to travel to that game? It didn't do anything. Recruits aren't going to jump out because they lost that game. It was kind of like... Go ahead, Matt.
Going off of you were saying about what does it matter? The bowl games matter because if you don't have a bowl game, then your team goes into a dead period where you're not practicing, you're not getting extra time. So where you're looking at, even if you're in the Podunk, I don't care, I'm in the middle of nowhere bowl, you're still with your coaches, you're still with your teammates, you're still at the facility, and you're still practicing. So those guys who maybe are not seeing a lot of significant playing time now are getting extra reps. I know for Florida State this year, the extra bowl time and the extra bowl prep gave Willie Taggart time to evaluate which coaches he was planning on keeping, which ones he was not going to retain, and he could get a feel for what players does he need to evaluate to see who does he need to target going into the post recruiting period. Where do the needs need to be for this last push to see, do you need an extra tight end? Do you need a wide receiver? What are the positions that you feel like you might be okay with? I think it helps teams to make the playoffs. So you want to be a team that makes a playoff so that you have that extra time to make your team better. If you don't, then you're sitting at home and you're not going to make yourself better, and you don't have that other publicity. Even if it's just for a couple minutes on ESPN, getting that extra time, it's another feather in your cap to be able to tell recruits, hey, you went to this bowl, we went to this bowl, you're able to receive, whatever prizes or handouts or things that they give you for participating in that bowl. And then if you become a part of it, maybe you go to a better one and you have the opportunity to win the championship ring. You're at one of the New Year's Day bowls, you're winning the Orange Bowl or something like that. You're going to get some nice merchandise out of that. That could be a selling point for some recruits. If you're not going to a bowl game, there's 1,000 bowl games. You can't make it to one, then don't tell me that teams aren't going to use that as a negative recruiting tool.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be the next point I made. they are basically just for practices. And I think at this point, if you got rid of them, it wouldn't make a difference. If you were consistent across and you said, okay, only playoff teams are in, and I know they're not going to jump right to 16. They'll say something like, I hope to God they skip 6 because no team deserves a bye. Could you imagine if Clemson had a bye and then got their ass kicked like they did last night? That'd be embarrassing. And I think that would cause more people.
But it could happen.
It could happen. That's why I think they need to jump right to 8. And then say, okay, we're going to cut out some of these lower bowls. And what they should do, and they'll never do, is they should tell teams you can't schedule FCS opponents. Like Alabama, no more Mercer before you play Auburn. You're done. Like, it's out. But what I would like to see them do is make that a spring game. That way you still have the extra practices. It's similar to what college baseball did. I actually, when I played college baseball, we went down to Florida for our spring training. Why not do that for these teams that play FCS opponents? If you're going to do like an in-state boost me up, like is Northern Iowa, like let's say like Iowa, Iowa State, Northern Iowa, they do like a spring game together, kind of like, all right, everyone from the state can come to it, kind of like a free recruiting period. They said you couldn't do satellite camps anymore or whatever, Harbaugh, but maybe you can do something to like help boost up football in your state. You just have a big spring game. It could be alternate weekends. Maybe 1 week it's at Iowa, 1 week it's at Iowa State. You invite an FCS team to bring their guys, and then you can play. They get some of the proceeds, donations, whatever you're going to get, publicity. They can get TV payout. I mean, they get TV payout from those spring games. Most of them are broadcast. Why not split it with those guys? And then you lose that point where, okay, well, we had to pay $8 million or whatever it is for the so-and-so opponent to come up. Do they even have enough scholarships used on their football team? Like, just throw it right out there and put it right in spring football. The game doesn't matter. It doesn't count because those games are usually wins anyway. Then it's in the spring, so you don't really even have some of the rush. I know some of the teams have lost to those schools over time. You'll see better games. You can better evaluate. And then you can get right into it, and then you do 12 opponents. But there's still other points that are going to be brought up. Every conference basically should have to be forced to have the same amount of members. If you have over a certain amount, like whatever, that's on you. But it should be like, I don't know if they could force them to 16 or 12 or whatever. But I think that's one of the sticking points. And so maybe the NCAA says instead of like forcing you at so many members, maybe you have to play 9 conference games, no FCS, and then that's your schedule. Because Notre Dame came out, and I don't know if you saw this, they said that they're reevaluating their schedule. And you know what that means? That means they're going to be dropping Michigan off again. They're going to be dumping all these big-name programs, and they're going to be playing patsies. Because right now they said...
Well, exactly.
Go ahead, Matt.
There's no motivation to schedule a tough conference because the committee already showed that they're not going to award points for playing a tough schedule. What they want to see is a conference champion that's undefeated. Take any of the Power Fives, have them all run the table, and they're guaranteed a lock. And to me, we go back, we've gone rounds on this, and I'm just going to be devil's advocate here. We want to expand the playoffs, and we want to add more teams. Well, now players are going to have to be tuned in longer. We're going to ask these young college athletes to play in higher profile games where they're going to be more at risk of injury. They're already worried about playing one extra college game or playing in a bowl game that some people think are meaningless. But now you're starting to add 2 to maybe 3 extra bowl games or extra games that they wouldn't be playing. They're going to be at just as much risk, if not more, because they're playing faster, stronger, more athletic opponents. That they could possibly end up injuring themselves and hurting their finances. Do you think that if they expanded it to say 16 teams, do you see the numbers of people still just saying, you know what, I'm going to sit out and not play in a bowl game, playing towards the national championship because I don't want to hurt my NFL stock? No, you're not going to see that. I'd be surprised if you did.
Yeah, I think, well, with that, they can't say that it's more games, it's more stress, because every other level of football plays it. And with this, what I would do is I would cut out conference championship games. So then you're really only adding one game. And that's the 8-team round. So the conference championship game, I would like to see conferences go to pods, back to more regional pods, where maybe in the Big Ten you have an Ohio State, Michigan State, then whoever, Indiana or someone in there, like as a fourth team. Then you have the Eastern pod with Penn State, Rutgers, Maryland, and whoever they add to get to 16 teams, or even if it's 14, whatever, they stay at it and they work it out. Those are the teams you play every year. So that way the Ohio State game's not there. And then you can rotate more against your conference so that you're going to play so-and-so pod. So maybe one year Michigan plays Penn State and then Maryland and Rutgers. Maybe the next year they play Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa or whoever. And then they play that other pod of like Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue. And that way you're playing kind of like the old conference games. There's no championship game. So they can't say, oh, well, you didn't play all your guys. If they're letting 16 teams in, who cares? Because if I'm looking at this list here, you could have Clemson, Oklahoma, so down to maybe TCU, who's at 13. Let's say Notre Dame. This is counting bowl wins. Notre Dame has 10 wins. There's a clear drop off around like 14 to where you start to see 9 and 5 teams come in. So I highly doubt that there's ever going to be double-digit win teams all the way outside of 16 teams. That's where you're able to let these lower conferences in. And if they're worried about, like, I know some people have said, well, let every conference be auto bid. I used to be in that camp. But maybe you just take like the top 2 or 3. You can't do rankings either. Because if you say, well, they have to be ranked higher than 16, you'll see poll members vote them at 17 just so that they don't want to see Memphis in. So you have to say, like, the best winning percentage out of all of these or whatever. Or even do like the NCAA tournament and have these lower conferences meet as that play-in game. And they play like the same week as the Army-Navy game or something, where it's only that game. So you have like the play-in game and the Army-Navy game. I think that's actually after the conference championship games, though. Or something similar. Like you just move that game so that you have these smaller conferences, they play in, and then they have to play. So that you can't say, okay, well, you guys had a easier schedule now, and we're afraid so-and-so is going to leave our conference and go join American Athletics so they can compete. Like, that won't happen. Just make it the play-in game. It's easy. They can easily figure it out. And that's where I think you're going to lose fans until you do. I mean, the ratings have been dropping every year. They've been disastrous for the college football playoffs. You're still seeing blowouts. The Clemson-Alabama game I turned off because it was frustrating just to watch a guy not be able to do anything. I already watched that earlier in the day with the Michigan quarterback game. So you have that, and why would I want to watch that? It just didn't make sense. There was no other options. If you have an expanding playoff, and let's say that maybe that's still the 4-team round, but the 2 weeks before that, I would at least had options to try to see, okay, which team's the best. And they're clicking. You don't have this whole month off, and then guys come in cold. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's one of the things I think. You have guys that have a whole month to go do stuff, go to the club with their buddies, not practice, not be on football. Then they're in the playoff. Go ahead. I think you might have broke out, though.
Yeah, I'm here. This is the thing that you're going to have at certain points, you're going to have your blowout games. I mean, it's going to happen. From time to time, there's just going to be a team that's going to come in and just beat the brakes off you. You know, for whatever reason, it happens sometimes. I don't think that you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think that everything is as bad as what it's being made out to be. I think this year is an outlier year where, because there have been so many other people who have had crappy years, and conferences as a whole have just beat each other up. You know, you look at what happened in the Big Ten with Iowa and with Michigan and with Ohio State and with Wisconsin and Penn State beating up on each other. And then you look at what the SEC did to each other with Georgia and Auburn and Alabama. You normally have one conference. It's usually the Big 12 that knocks themselves out. And they somehow managed to get themselves back into a position where they were able to put a tough rated team And I think when you look at that Oklahoma team, if they had a little bit better play calling, they had Georgia on the ropes. When they had the scoop and score late in the fourth quarter, I thought, oh, this is a wrap. Oklahoma has it, and they let them back in, and Georgia was able to pull the win off. But I think you don't have to necessarily throw it away because they met the criteria. They won their conference. They're repeating as the champions. I think their coaching staff has done an excellent job with their program. They deserve to be there. It just so happened that Alabama was pissed that they lost last year, and they used that revenge motive to take it out on them.
Yeah, that's where I know I'm looking through these. I think, like, even with the bowl games, I saw some people. So ESPN, if people weren't aware, ESPN started a thing where they were going to give a trophy to the conference that had like the best record. Well, the Big Ten clinched that early because the Big Ten ended up 7-1, and a lot of people said, well, that's because they weren't in the playoffs, so they had better bowl pick'ems. They were favored to win all these games. Well, where were those same people like 2 or 3 years ago when the Big Ten was getting 3 or 4 teams in these BCS bowls and they were underdogs in every game? Because that's basically what happened with the SEC this year. Let me see what their record ended up being. They ended up being 4-5. But when you get 2 teams in the playoff, those 2 teams end up winning. Everyone else is slotted down in the bowl games. They're all heavy underdogs. So to me, the bowl games really, they don't, it still comes back to like they don't mean much. I mean, you're not going to have anyone like show me anything in these games. Are guys going to start sitting out more? I think they are. And that was actually a question I got on Twitter. Someone was like, what do you think about players sitting out? And I saved it for today. But I honestly think more and more people are going to sit out. Because why would you play at that point? If you're going to go pro, now that's not everybody. Some people need these games to play in. Think of it as like the Senior Bowl. Are people going to stop going to the Senior Bowl? No, because that's going to help their draft stock. For some guys who were first-round picks, I think Ohio State had like 2 or 3 guys sit out their game, and they still won. So if that was a playoff game, do you think those guys would have sat out? No, because the fan base would have hated them forever, and the NFL career is not going to last forever. Look at how many guys come back to their college after their NFL careers failed as coaches or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm still torn on the whole thing. Go ahead.
I also think you are going to see more players sit out just because of the nature of the beast. But I think it depends on what your draft position is as well. When you look at someone like a Derwin James, who's arguably the best safety in the country, he's one of the best defensive players in the nation. He has nothing else to prove and has played consistently over the course of the year that there was nothing that he was going to show in the bowl game that was going to either hurt or help his draft stock. Teams are either going to love him or they're going to hate him. I look at someone, the example that I used over break was, look at Saquon Barkley. I felt like even though he has all the weightlifting numbers and he has all the measurable things, I think he had to play in the bowl game because for whatever reason, he never really performs well on the big stage. And I think I thought he showed well in the bowl game versus Washington. I think that helped his stock playing against a tough defense and playing a tough team and showing that he can do better against a tough competition. Anyone can run wild when you're a good athlete versus someone worse than you. Show what you can do versus a quality opponent. And I think that's something that for players on the bubble of where is their draft stock, it's going to help them to play in the bowl game and do well, as opposed to playing and then laying an egg, which they're more likely to do in the NFL anyhow, just because of the level of competition.
I'm glad you brought up Saquon because I noticed the same thing. In the bigger games, he might have had big plays like the Ohio State game. He ran a kickback and stuff like that, but he was never consistent as a running back. And in the NFL, that's what you have to be. I contrast that to Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott showed up in big games, and he was dominant. He was a big reason why they won the national championship. So you have Saquon, who they've turned to. I know I mentioned it way back when they lost to Iowa. When they almost lost to Iowa. They turned to him. he didn't deliver, and then they had to go elsewhere. I liken it to another great Penn State running back, Larry Johnson. If you remember back in like the 90s, or 2000s, I think he played in the early 2000s. Everyone wanted him for the Heisman. He had all these great numbers. But if you actually look at his numbers that year, he hit the 2000 mark. I don't think he won the Heisman. I forget who did. But every game Penn State lost, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State that year, he was held under 100 yards. And who were the big teams on their schedule? Those teams. Those were the teams that he was going to be playing with. Those were the type of athletes he's going to be playing with in the NFL. He just didn't have it. I mean, he had a decent NFL career, but if you're naming like even Chiefs great running backs, you're going to start with Priest Holmes. I mean, they had the system in place for a great running back, and Larry Johnson just didn't fit the bill when he got drafted there. That's what I see from Saquon. I mean, some of these bowl games, yeah, he showed up. Is he going to be great in the NFL? I don't know, because he didn't show it against great teams in college. And that's concerning to me. Another one that everyone is really high on, and I'll end on this before we get to the NFL. We'll do some playoff stuff before we end the show. But Sam Darnold, I've been low on him because in that Ohio State game, he was god-awful. I mean, that's who you're going to be. He can't read a defense. If you can't read it, that one interception for a touchdown was so embarrassing. The linebacker didn't do anything. How did he not see him? You can't tell me that's the number one draft pick. And then after the game, ESPN was trying to push the narrative. Who was the guy from UCLA? Josh Rosen or whatever. He was saying, I don't want to play for the Browns or whatever. He basically is what he was saying. And then Sam Darnold came out and said, I'll play with anyone that can take me. Yeah, because you can't read a defense. In the NFL, that's not going to fly. Carson Palmer retired today, and he's probably the best quarterback out of USC the past 20 years. Everyone else that was highly rated out there has been an NFL bust. A complete bust. Matt Leinart, bust. Who was that other guy? Barkley or Bradley, whatever. Bust. I don't even remember his name. Matt Barkley, wasn't it? Bust. Yep. Every guy that gets a bust. Mark Sanchez, bust. I mean, you have Sam Darnold, the guy, he doesn't interview well. He can't read a defense. It just doesn't seem like he's going to be able to get it on the next level. So why would I, if I'm a franchise guy, I could just see that Browns drafted him number one, and I just know that they're going to have another winless season. So what did the bowl game do for him? Like, if he would have sat out, he would have been a higher pick than what he is now, because no one plays defense in the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 had the worst record in bowl games. I think, were they 1-7 or something? It was awful. And that's who he's playing against, and he's putting up pretty good numbers. But, I mean, wow. Any thoughts on that before we cycle into the NFL?
I will, and I'll say this. I give my tip for the cap to him. Ohio State was a quality opponent. He went out, and did he play well? No. But I give him credit for at least manning up and taking his swings against a really tough team. I don't know that he has the talent around him. When you watched I tweeted it out. When you saw UCL or USC compared to Ohio State, it looked like a varsity team playing a junior high team. USC looked completely undermanned, and I don't know if it was because they haven't gotten the recruiting back to full strength yet with all the sanctions and everything, but it looked like they were just playing like 16 and 17-year-old kids. And if you're playing that many underclassmen, then hopefully the weight room's good to you, because Ohio State just looked like a demon team in comparison. They looked massive, and they just imposed their will on them. Well, I think the thing that can help Darnold is to have an excellent showing at the Combine. When he's out there with the NFL scouts and he's able to go through all the pro-style drills, he can potentially help himself. I'm not saying that he is going to be a bust, but he can improve his stock doing well at the Combine. That, whether he played, whether he sat out, I don't think that's going to have any bearings if he lights it up at the Combine and does well.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I actually forgot. I did have that written down. So USC, I'm looking at the talent composite right now. They were number 3 on the list behind Ohio State. They actually have 8 5-stars on their team. Their overall roster rating is like 934. They're even better than Georgia. And I think that's a knock on Who's their coach? Clay Helton? I don't think he's a good coach. But I did want to contrast. So if you watch the game, everyone was talking about how fast and talented USC was and how Ohio State was going to have trouble with them. And when the second half started, they had changed their whole narrative, and they came out with this piece on how Ohio State's defensive line was just too fast and strong for USC. And they changed everything where USC's strength was that they had better recruits, they were faster, whatever. They always say, oh, you can't match the speed of these Los Angeles kids. And when Ohio State was just destroying them, they came out with a piece that ESPN did, you know how they do the in-game specials? It was well, if you look at their line only averages 6'5", 300 pounds. And that's just not going to get it done today against this Ohio State defensive line. And they tried to do a little promo on how bad the offensive line was. They were throwing them under the bus. But it was just because in the Pac-12, they don't recruit like that, number one. In the Big Ten, you play, and let's be honest, in the SEC and even some of the ACC schools, you play against that every week. Maybe not in the ACC Coastal, maybe not in the Big 12 West or Big 10 West. But on the Big 10 East what's the bad ACC division? I don't know what they are. But if you play in Clemson and Florida State,
Coastal.
Yeah, if you play in the Florida State, Clemson, NC State, those are big defensive lines. Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, those are big defensive lines where a lot of guys get drafted. And then in the Pac-12, you have who? What school gets drafted out there? You get a couple quarterbacks and some speed guys, but other than that, you don't get defensive guys drafted out of there. So, of course, they're going to get manhandled by Ohio State. I thought that was funny. We'll use that as our segue because we're running out of time to go to the – I know we started a little bit late, but we'll go into the NFL playoffs. So the NFL, a lot of coaching changes, to be honest. To me, that overshadows – I should have put it on the list, but that overshadows the wild card. And we talked about recycling coaches all the time. But there were and I don't even think I don't think the Bengals, I thought I got an alert today. I think the Bengals ended up not firing.
They extended him. They extended Marvin Lewis to 2019. I think it's a great move.
Well, why would you fire him? You're going to be up against 5 other teams trying to hire guys. Well, why would someone want to go to Cincinnati? They pretty much had their hands tied behind their back. But go ahead.
But I think that it's the right move to make. I don't think that you're looking at Tyler Eifert having injuries. You're looking at some inconsistent play. I don't know that it's something that you have to remove Marvin Lewis. He's consistently getting the Bengals. They've won the division in recent years. It's not that far off that they've been a playoff caliber team, and they performed well. You're going to have hiccups along the way. It doesn't knock the steps that you're making to field a competitive team, because if you get into that negative spiral, you run the risk of turning yourself into a Cleveland, where every year you're waiting out to see who they're going to fire, who they're going to hire. And they trade GMs. They went through Mike Holmgren. Who built Seattle into a Super Bowl caliber team? Built Green Bay into a Super Bowl caliber team and say, no, you're not good enough, Myers. Keep going. You don't know what you're talking about. How the hell do you conscientiously do that?
Well, it's I'm looking at it, and I just checked because I brought up Bill O'Brien, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, and I heard that he is going to get fired. Well, now they haven't made a decision on him yet, but why would you fire him? I mean, if there's so many coaches, they're going to be competing with these teams that are going to be hiring, and they're going to say, well, why would I come to the Texans? Your star quarterback was hurt and you just fired your coach. What kind of job security am I going to have here? I mean, Watson came in, he was lights out when they were there. They were a playoff team. He goes down with an ACL from practice. It wasn't even because he was running them in the game too hard. Freak accident, and now he's going to be fired? Get real. Some of these teams, I'm surprised that the Raiders fired Jack Del Rio. Didn't he just win them their division last year? Carr gets a broken back, which we knew was going to be trouble. They let Murray go. I mean, these are GM decisions that kind of put them behind the ball this year. And then they're like, we'll blame him.
I'll answer that one for you. Del Rio got let go because of the groomer. Moving to Vegas, they put the dollar sign in the right place. Gruden's already said he's interested in going to the Raiders, and in a true Raider move, throwing partial ownership on the table. Are you out of your mind? They're putting ownership into it. Why would you? If you're John Gruden, that's the move that draws you out of the booth.
Yeah, I agree, and that's where okay, so now you're going to be competing against them, but you're competing against all these teams. It's like to me it just seems like there's never been this many coaches, and they always recycle. Are they just going to kind of reshuffle, and all the same head coaches are going to be in place next year, just in different teams? Because that's happened before. Very close to where there's only a couple new ones. I mean, you have the Giants. That's a pretty decent one. I need to find out what are the openings in the NFL, because there are a bunch of them that were just some of them were out of left field. Go ahead.
Is you look at the Giants ran Coughlin out, and Buffalo ran Doug Marrone out, and so then Marrone goes to Jacksonville, with Coughlin being one of their administrative people, and has Jacksonville playing as one of the top teams in the AFC right now. So, I mean, there's that irony that it can be done with these recycled coaches, but I think that sometimes they get canned, and then they get recycled back into coordinator roles that then springboard them back into head coaching jobs.
Yeah, and
a la John Fox, who's got canned in Chicago.
The Falcons are so dangerous.
Yeah, that's where you have. Sorry if people at home could hear that random crap. I hate trying to look things up and then you get a random ad. But it looked like there were 6 jobs open. There were about to be 8, but like we said, the Bengals ended up not firing Marvin Lewis because they were like, "Holy shit, everyone's opening, everyone's hiring." Think about it. If 8 teams would have had opening, that's almost a third of the league. A third of the league is having complete turnover. No wonder the Steelers, we made fun of Tomlin at certain points, but having that longevity and even just that consistency lets your team just be successful over the course of time. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs. But, I mean, come on. I think about it. John Fox has been fired from a couple of jobs, but he's made it to the Super Bowl. Was it 3 times? He made it with the Panthers. Did he make it? Who else did he make it with? He made it with the Broncos, didn't he?
He won it with the Broncos. He as a coordinator, I believe.
Yeah, I mean,
was he there as a coordinator?
I don't know. I can't remember. I thought he was also with the Bears. He didn't take the Bears to the Super Bowl, did he? That was more recent.
He just got fired from the Bears.
Oh yeah, that was his last stop. But I mean, you have a bunch of just jobs that are opening and closing. It's really weird. They're these guys, and all right, well, let's get into these games. So the Bills, the Bills make it. They looked like they were dead in the water. They were making all kind of changes, taking their quarterback out, and luckily all these other teams imploded, and they find their way in against the Jaguars, who, to be honest, I'm hoping the Bills win this game. I don't know who does it. It doesn't have who the Steelers will play, right? Not until they decide who wins. But I think the Bills would be the best matchup for the Steelers, just because. Do they want to play the Jaguars again? No, definitely not. That first game did not go well. I think the Steelers pretty much own the other 2 teams, Titans and Chiefs, so that game doesn't matter. So the best scenario.
I think that's who they're going to play. The fighting Reeds.
Andy Reid's the Chiefs. I will say, I like Alex Smith. He made a bunch of plays when he was with the 49ers. I know it was the 49ers growing up, but they have, he had him there. He comes to the Chiefs with Andy Reid. You're in the playoffs. They're good for 1 win, and then they're good for an early exit. So I could see them beating the Titans. What are your thoughts on that game?
I want to see Andy Reid finally win the big one, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that the Titans are healthy, or healthier than they have been. And I think that Tennessee is going to end up winning that one is what my gut feeling tells me. I think that once you hit playoff football, it becomes more of a ground and pound game. And I think that the Tennessee has the weapons with their running back duo to really become a force, at least in that round of the playoffs.
I will say the Chiefs have the hot rookie running back, but normally in playoffs, those rookies don't really show up because they get keyed on, and then it's tough for them to come on. Let's go back to the Bills-Jaguars since I didn't let you talk. What did you think of that game?
I think Jacksonville's defense is going to be really tough. The quarterback play I don't think gets any better. Whether you kept Tyrod in the entire time or you have all the issues that they went with Peterman, who then choked, and then they went back to him, I don't think it matters. They could draw Carson Palmer out of retirement for this game, and I still think Jacksonville's gonna be the one to bring it home.
Yeah, I think Jacksonville, they're looking deadly. I would like to see them play the Patriots, but I think, is that how it stacks up? The Steelers are going to end up playing the Jaguars? What's the rulings here?
I think that because Buffalo's the lower seed, they're the 6th, that I think they'll probably go to New England.
Okay, well, yeah, I didn't know if it had something to do with conference or division champions, because I knew they had like some weird thing there. Let's jump to the NFC. I'll check on that and see. Falcons and Rams. Actually, the NFC South. The stupid autocorrect on my phone made me do. I tried to tweet out that is the South the best, and get some feedback. And of course, my phone corrected the NFC West for some reason, which is completely wrong. That's one of the worst divisions. But the NFC South, I fixed it and sent it out there. People are thinking that is the best division in football, and you have 3 teams making it. They're all right here in the wild card round just because they're beating each other up. Falcons, Rams, do you think the Falcons have enough? I know you picked the Rams early on. We keep bringing it back up because I was completely wrong on that. Let's be honest. Do you think the Rams continue, or is it back to Matty Ice?
I don't know. I want to say that Atlanta continues because I think Devontae Freeman is a beast, and I think that the majority of the pieces that they have are there. The only question that I have right now is how much of the offense was an attribute to Shanahan's ability as a play caller, and how much of that drops off because now they're dealing with Sarkisian. Just like when Lane Kiffin left and the ball was in his court, Alabama dropped the ball because Kiffin wasn't there. Shanahan left, and now we're dealing with Sarkisian. Does he have the firepower to get him over the hump? I want to say yes, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams pull the win off.
Yeah, didn't Sarkisian, did he win a national championship, or did they lose when he was there?
No, that was last year. They lost to Clemson.
Yeah.
He might have won it the year before when they played the first one, when he was in rehab after he got fired from USC.
That's right. He was drunk at team functions.
And then he went into Alabama as like a consultant because you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, that's the type of guy they want to go ahead and promote. Some guy that's drunk at team functions, and then they're going to go ahead and put him behind $1 million offense. But
yeah, but he does have that Alabama tag, so hire him up.
Let's look at the other one. I'll be honest, for that first one, I want to say Rams, but I just think the Falcons have another run in them. It might come down to the offensive play calling, like you said. Panthers, Saints, being down here in Carolina, I would like to see the Panthers win. For some reason, man, Drew Brees, he never goes away. He's like an ageless wonder. When did he come out? Is he older than Tom Brady? Because he has to be close. What are your thoughts on that game?
I think that for as good as Carolina's... Well, I'm just going to say I think it's going to be Carolina. I think New Orleans has some shiny new weapons with Kamara, and they always seem to cycle 3 or 4 running backs around. But I think with having Olsen, and the thing that surprised me was when Carolina traded Calvin Benjamin away, I thought, well, Olsen was injured. They got rid of Calvin Benjamin. I thought they're giving away all their pieces. They must be looking to rebuild. And then Carolina crawled out of the sewer and started playing some decent football. So I think Cam Newton he's an X factor. If he's on, Carolina could be a possible threat because running quarterbacks in the NFL are kind of like a scary thing that nobody really knows how to deal with other than drill them in the chest and knock them out. So that could be something to keep an eye on as the games progress.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you made because whenever I think of like them trading Kelvin Benjamin, I mean, he's a Florida State guy. You know, those guys don't really pan out in the NFL, so it's kind of like cutting dead weight, especially whenever you have Devin Funchess, that Michigan man out there as your top receiver. Then could take taking those big plays. But yeah, I hope to see Carolina win that game. But we'll see what happens. Dude, Drew Brees, I looked it up. He's 38. Tom Brady's 40. So it's like some teams, guys are retiring like Carson Palmer. Then you have just Drew Brees like playing forever. Tom Brady playing forever. So maybe that's the key to success. Play your college ball up north. Play in the Big Ten. And then you can play forever in the NFL. Because like, look at Roethlisberger. He didn't play in the Big Ten, but he played up north. Miami, Ohio. He's still around. But I did have the seeding here too. So the Jaguars are the 3rd seed. So Steelers will play them if they win. It goes by highest seed. Nothing to do with the division or anything. So best case for Steelers, Bills upset the Jaguars, and then they end up playing Titans or the Chiefs. But I mean, kind of you're looking at it too. Which team has the best chance of knocking out the Patriots? Bills, Titans, or the Chiefs? Chiefs maybe, but then again, the Steelers would have to compete against the Jaguars, so that's a tough situation.
Here's one for you. What are your thoughts on the whole James Harrison getting cut by Pittsburgh and then getting signed by New England?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were out last week. I had called on it as soon as it happened. Well, as soon as he was cut, I was going to break it on the show last week and say that I thought he was going to side with the Patriots because he's giving them intel. They're basically saying, okay, we'll give you playing minutes if you come in, run the scout team. He denied it, but that's 100% what they're doing. There's no joking. That's what's happening. You're coming and you played for so many years. I've heard the Steelers are going to cut him out of the circle there. I think normally if you play at Pittsburgh for so long, you get your statue around the stadium. I've heard that has rubbed some Pittsburgh brass the wrong way, him leaving how he did, because he was complaining about playing time. And the Steelers were saying, like, hey, if you stick it out, whatever, he wanted to be a lifelong Steeler, then be a lifelong Steeler. You never know what's going to happen. That veteran depth is very important in the playoffs. The Steelers had to move some guys around or whatever, but why would you want to ruin your legacy for what? To try to get a quick ring? So karma would be best if the Steelers could somehow beat the Patriots just to watch him mumble on the sideline. Maybe he can push like some big 10,000-pound sleds off the field whenever the game's over to prove that he still has something left in the tank. But, man, that was such a bitch move. There's no way around it. Why would you jump to the biggest rival and then say it's about playing time? They're not playing you. You're old. You are old. If it's about playing time, you would have jumped to the Browns. And maybe you could have had them beat the Steelers last week because it was a closer game. I know the Steelers weren't really trying. But, man, it wasn't about the playing time. 100% not about the playing time. There were other contenders that he would have had more of an impact on than the Patriots. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the things that I saw, aside from the fact that he has intel, is the fact that he's a veteran player who's played a long time in the league. And it seems like Belichick likes to figure out what is he doing to keep himself motivated and playing so that he can take these older veteran players and get them to fit his scheme, his style of offense. So I almost think maybe not so much the intel, but just the general, you're a veteran who's played a long time. How do you milk a couple more years out of a player and get them to still perform? What better person to do it than an aging veteran? And Harrison left to go to Cincinnati before. So I don't think that it necessarily hurts his... Did he leave on crappy terms right now? Yes. Let 10 years pass. Let him retire in a year or two. Let him... All he'll do is sign the one-day contract, and he'll be right back in the good graces. We can show the clips of him returning the interception versus Arizona in the Super Bowl. All sins will be forgiven with time.
Yeah, I think it really depends on if they beat the Steelers this year, though. If they beat them, and it's because of like weird things where like they made some interceptions and they knew some plays or something, that's where you're going to really see Steeler fans. They won't forget. They won't forget. But we'll end it with that. I don't have anything else. What was the one thing? Oh, I did see. So we talked about the bowl games. Yeah, Michigan had a big lead, and then they hit turnover ball where they were driving in to go up 26-7 or something like that. Turned the ball over a bunch of different times. I saw some good things in that game. A lot of young players played. One move that I did see come from that, I think Greg Frey, I don't know if we talked about it, is going to jump to Florida State. And I thought he did a solid job with the line at Michigan, so I think that'll be a good move. I've heard that he's taking less pay, and he played at Florida State, I think. But there's some ties there. So
he was on the Natty team in '93.
Yeah, so he definitely wants to be there, so that should be a good move for him. I know some people were low on him early in the year, but I think they've came around. I did see another interesting move where Harbaugh has fired his strength and conditioning guy that I think he had with him on the 49ers and is bringing in the old strength and conditioning coach for Wisconsin. So he obviously sees where these late season meltdowns happen. He must be tying it to strength and conditioning to fire a longtime guy and try to bring someone else in. So that'll be my ending tidbit. It's interesting to see what other moves he'll make on the coaching staff to get ready. I know the team was young this year. A lot of young guys got experience. But is he ready to make that move to take the next step? Anything for you to end the show on, Matt?
Well, I think, ribbing you a little bit about the Michigan loss, I'm wondering how long this is going to rub the boosters before it comes back to bite them. Taking the trips, getting all the commercial money, doing all these stunts like sleeping in your kicker's bedroom floor and doing all these antics. But if you're showing up every year with 3 and 4 losses, and you're being told you're given all the resources, you're given all the money, you're given all the opportunity, and you're not beating Ohio State, how long is that leash is gonna be given? Just because he was a graduate, does he get an extra long leash? Does he get to just play out for 5-6 years? Or is he going to get Rich Rod or Brady Hoke and be on the hot seat here within the next 2 years if he can't get it done?
Well, I think when you're looking at that, the first year, I go by year real quick. The run through, first year, he definitely overachieved. People had picked that team at like 7 wins. He ended up winning 10 games. Second year, people considered him to be second in the Big Ten. They were in it up into the Ohio State game. Some people said there was a bad spot. Michigan could have been in the championship game. Whatever. That's about where they ended up being marked. People thought they should have won the Florida State game. But again, this is just a bowl game. Doesn't matter. So I'd say he's on par for last year. This year, everyone expected 8 wins. He gets 8 wins, and everyone's upset. So I think he is going to get some pressure. But this is pretty much what everyone expected. He lost 11 guys. Like his whole starting defense, except for one guy, I think went to the NFL. So there's going to be a drop off. Some of the things that you saw yesterday's game, freshman kick returner takes a punt off the face mask, fumbles it. Freshman quarterback throws a couple interceptions. Like these are freshmen he's playing. So I think next year you should see a jump just based on that maturity, because you did play a lot of freshmen this year, and it'll be interesting because some people already have Michigan. I think Fox had them as number 3 preseason next year. That's if Shea Patterson clears, which I think I text you about, or maybe tweeted at you. Shea Patterson is not guaranteed to play. He has to wait his ruling by the NCAA. I think if he shows up, I'm still high on Dylan McCaffrey. Don Brown has spoke very highly of him. It's the only quarterback I've ever heard Don Brown talk about raving reviews on how he runs a scout team. So I think you're really going to have a quarterback battle next year, and I think that's where people are getting frustrated. Harbaugh's supposed to be the quarterback guru. Hasn't looked anything like it. If you have competent quarterback play, you have 10 wins this year, at least. And that's where people, I think they're just, it's not fun to watch the games when you're just expecting, interception here. And then the guy throws an interception. So if the quarterback turns around, I think all the pressure will be right back off. But again, you're bringing another guy that could throw off some stuff. I don't know. I don't know your thoughts on that, or if you have anything else to end on.
Well, I think the only thing with that I've joked around about, I think the reason that Harbaugh gets himself into some hot situations is because of the style that, like, his offense reminds me a lot of watching Jimbo Fisher's, where if you're going to not be an up-tempo team and you're going to use a lot more 2 tight end, 3 tight end power sets with a fullback, then you have to be very efficient with the way that you move the ball. If you're turning the ball over, I mean, and when I watched a couple of the Michigan games, what I saw is it was Don Brown being heavily relied on to keep them competitive in the games, getting turnovers, field position changes that put Michigan in positions to where they could apply some pressure. There wasn't a lot of scheme offensively because the offense is what the offense is. It's power, it's ISO, it's downhill running with some play action mixed in. So with that going in, if you tighten the box down, if you put a lot of people in there, there's not a lot of things that I saw from this year that made me think, oh, well, there's a viable passing threat. Everything is so predicated on the run game and establishing the run that if you take that away, you really handcuff Michigan. I think that's going to be something that they're really going to have to work on if they're going to take a bigger step going into next season.
Well, I think that's a good point where you talk about the receivers. I'm pretty sure almost all the receivers are freshmen this year. You lost your 2 top receivers to the NFL, and in the Florida game, it looked like freshman Tariq Black was going to be that big play guy that was going to step up, and he broke his ankle. So it's going to be next year. The big thing is going to be, are these freshmen going to take that jump? Because if they do, look out, because you're going to have to deal with them for 2 years. You basically have a whole crew of freshmen, redshirt freshmen that played this year. And these are like 5-star receivers that he was able to bring in. So you get them to stretch the field and a quarterback that can deliver the ball. Who knows? Look out, because was it last year or 2 years ago? That 1 year Harbaugh was here, that was the highest scoring Michigan team since like 1907 or something crazy like that. Since like the Fielding Yost years. That was the highest scoring Michigan team. I don't think it was his first year. Maybe it was last year's Wilton Spate team. So, I mean, his scheme works. You just have to have some accuracy from the quarterback and guys that can get open. And I think this year, just too much youth. Anything else to end on?
Nope. Just excited to see how the rest of this bowl season plays out in our NFL playoffs.
Yeah, we'll check that out. We did have a college bowl pick'em. I think we have a winner, but we'll bring that up next week as we make sure I don't know how the points 100% works, as we did confidence. So you'll be hearing from that. Follow us on Twitter. We do live Facebook every Tuesday at 9. Sorry my voice is messed up. It's been freezing down here in North Carolina. The dry air from all the heat's got me a little bit messed up in my throat. So apologize for that. And hopefully you like the show, though. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.